You know, some names just feel like they're part of the land itself. Stories that kind of beat like a heart, right at the edge of history and legend. And Joaquín Murrieta, that's one of those names. So, let's dive into the myth of this guy, who became something way more than just a man. He became the very spirit of the American Southwest.
So, the big question is, who was this guy? Really? The historical record is, well, it's a mess. It's this tangled web where facts and stories are all mixed up. So you have to ask, was he a vicious, cold-blooded bandit? Or was he something totally different? A folk hero, maybe? A symbol of justice for people who are being pushed aside? That's really the core puzzle we're looking at.
And this phrase right here, the Robin Hood of the West, that says it all, doesn't it? It completely reframes him. He's not just some outlaw anymore. No, he's a symbol of someone fighting back against a totally unfair system. A guy whose whole world was getting ripped apart during the California Gold Rush. And right here, this is the exact spot where history starts to blur into legend.
Okay, so let's try to peel back some of those layers to get to the man behind the myth. You gotta remember, his story was born out of the chaos of the gold rush. This was a brutal time. There was something called the foreign miners tax, basically designed to kick guys like him out. And the stories say his own family was horrifically attacked by American miners. It's in this pressure cooker of violence and injustice that the line between the real man and the legend gets completely blurred.
Now, to really get a handle on Murrieta's world, the source material we're looking at gives us this really powerful idea, a new way to see things. It asks us to stop thinking about the place he lived as just a simple frontier, a line on a map, and instead see it as something much more alive, the borderland.
So what is a borderland? Well, it's not just the line that separates two countries. Forget the map for a second. Think of it more like a doorway, a threshold. It's this in-between space where cultures don't just meet, they crash into each other. They mix. They create something totally new. It's a place where who you are isn't set in stone. Your identity can shift and change, just like sand dunes in the desert. This really helps put it in perspective, right? On one hand, you've got the way we usually think about borders, as a barrier, a line that just divides us from them, a place of conflict. But the idea of the borderland flips that completely. It's not a barrier, it's fertile ground. It's not just a line, it's a space that creates. It's not just about conflict, it's about transformation. And this is the world that gave rise to a figure like Joaquín Murrieta. All right, so let's take this idea of the borderland and apply it directly to Murrieta. Because in that kind of space, he stops being just some guy from a history book. He becomes something bigger. He turns into an archetype, a living, breathing symbol of defiance against all the forces that were trying to wipe him and his entire culture off the map. And you can see all the different ways this plays out. Think about it. As an outlaw, he's basically a social critic, right? He's working outside the law to show just how unfair that law is. He becomes a powerful symbol of cultural survival for Mexican people in this new American West. His whole life story turns into a metaphor for reinvention. And ultimately, he is the spirit of the borderland. He embodies the whole idea.
And this is so important to understand. His defiance, it wasn't just about the physical stuff, the raids and the robberies. It was something much deeper. It was a spiritual fight. It was this powerful, almost primal act of reclaiming his own dignity, of shouting, "I am here," and holding on to his ability to choose his own path in a world that wanted to take everything from him.
And that leads us right into one of the most powerful ideas in his whole story, something that I think we can all relate to, even today. And that's this really tricky, fluid thing we call identity, and how sometimes you have no choice but to reinvent yourself. I mean, think about it. Murrieta was literally living at a crossroads. He had his Mexican heritage on one side, and on the other, this totally dominant Anglo-American culture that was taking over California. And that struggle, that's something so many people still experience today, especially in border areas. You're constantly juggling different histories, different identities, and you end up creating this new hybrid version of yourself that's a dynamic mix of everything. You can practically chart the course of his transformation. Step 1, he faces this absolutely brutal oppression. He loses everything, his land, his family, his whole way of life. Step 2, instead of letting it break him, he reclaims his dignity by fighting back. And that leads to Step 3. He forges a completely new path for himself. He goes from being a victim to becoming a legend that lasts forever. It's an incredible blueprint for survival, really.
So, why are we still talking about this guy? A story from the 1800s? Why does it still grab us? I think it's because it taps into something really fundamental, something timeless. His myth goes way beyond just history. In a way, it becomes a mirror for our own lives, our own journeys.
When you really think about it, his legend shows us that the kinds of challenges he faced, they're universal, right? And it teaches us that the real frontier, that borderland between who you used to be and who you're becoming, it's not just some line on an old map.
No, it's a state of being. It's that personal space inside all of us where we have to face down our own challenges, reclaim our own stories, and figure out who we are. So the question his story really leaves us with isn't about him at all. It's about you. Where is your frontier?